All right, for today's video review, we're going to start taking a look at Transformers Age of the Primes Wreck and Doom Collection Autobot Sandstorm versus Slugslinger. This is, of course, another one of our Amazon exclusive sets here, continuing on from the Wreck and Roll collection, the Doom and Destruction collection, to now Wreck and Doom. So they've got one Wrecker and one Doom and Destruction. What are they called? The Mayhem Attack Squad guys here. And, as like with usual, I'm going to split, these multi-pack videos into just two separate videos. So today I'm just going to be taking a look at Sandstorm, and then I'll take a look at Slugslinger in his own video. So without further ado, we'll just take him off to the side and just take a look at Sandstorm. And yeah, this guy was really the main reason I wanted to pick up this set here, because I actually opted for not buying the Legacy United Sandstorm when he came out last year, because I knew that they would eventually do this guy instead. And I really personally, I'm a bigger fan of the cartoon head for Sandstorm than the toy head. Honestly, I think it's a little weird that they decided to do it in this particular way, because like of the two, you'd sort of think that the one with the, like the battle mask and the the more toy accurate one would be the one that's like in the, quote unquote wreckers, right? Whereas like cartoon Sandstorm was a pacifist, so it's a little bit strange to have the one with the cartoon head be the one that's in the wreckers, but whatever. If I really wanted to, I could just cover up the little wrecker symbol there. But otherwise, he's, pretty much the cartoon Sandstorm I was wanting. Obviously, the design of the toy in general steers a way more towards the toy design for Sandstorm than the cartoon design, but at least he does have that, faceplateless head there, which we'll see in robot mode. But other than that, I can't tell like a huge number of differences. Like I think that the fists of the the original one are gray rather than the orange that they are here. But honestly, it looks pretty similar from what I can tell. But again, I don't have that figure to compare to. And yeah, obviously he's a triple changer, and his helicopter mode is just wonderful. I think this is maybe my favorite mode of the figure, which is not to say the other modes are bad necessarily, but man, what a satisfying little helicopter. Like, yeah, he's got the arm sticking out to the side there, but other than that, he's just nice and big and chunky. The rotor rotates well. He's got his little back piece here, which actually comes separately in the box. You have to attach it, but whatever. He's got his big wheels up here and then little rolling wheels here, so he actually rolls pretty decently well. He comes with a bunch of accessories here. He comes with a couple guns here, which, for the pacifist version of Sandstorm, seems a little silly to have him have guns, but whatever. Never bad to have more accessories. And in terms of storage, you probably are just supposed to like peg them onto the side here and call it a day, which I don't love. But again, I'd never really thought of Sandstorm as a character who would carry guns, at least, that version of Sandstorm. Obviously, the Wrecker definitely would. But so I'm just going to leave these off to the side, but that's where they can go. And then the other neat feature that he comes with is this little like rescue cage kind of thing, where you've got this actual winch with real string kind of used to attach it there, and then this can peg onto the top here, and then you can take this little bit which has another 5mm peg on it, and you can plug it on underneath here and have him carrying this little rescue cage, which I think is super cool. It's just a very neat feature. Obviously, in terms of like having this actually displayed or whatever, you might want to have it like propped up on some sort of stand or something to have that whole like hanging down, or just like that. Otherwise, it doesn't really have like a cleaner place to store, because it obviously can't stay underneath and have him sit flat on the ground, because that doesn't really work. But it's a neat feature nonetheless. And I guess if you're not plugging it in there, you could take the little handheld pistol and plug that in there to store that instead, if you wanted storage for that. But you could also plug it on back here, I guess. Not too bad. But yeah, so that's the accessories he comes with. They're a little bit more, this we'll talk about, because it has some integration in the buggy mode, which I think is the main purpose why it actually exists. But it's neat that they decided to add the little like rescue cage thing with the working winch here for the helicopter mode. It's a fun feature, even if you don't end up using it. But yeah, in terms of comparisons in this mode, Just for a standard one, here he is with Kingdom Sideswipe. Obviously, the usual, way too small to be scaling with deluxe cars, but, that's what they look like. For another helicopter comparison, here he is with Age of the Prime's Vortex there, so you can see what the two of them look like together. And then here he is with my previous version of SANDSTORM, the Thrilling 31, which obviously took quite a few liberties with the design. They went in a very different direction, giving him the, VTOL mode there, which is an awesome mode. But if you were looking for a G1 SANDSTORM, like this guy definitely hits the mark a lot more. But that's what they look like together. And then, of course, being a triple changer, he is going to have a second vehicle mode here, which we can get on into. What's really cool is, like, as opposed to most helicopter figures, the rotors actually stay attached and they don't, come off, even for, going into buggy mode. And they find a really clever way to store those away, which is awesome. So yeah, first thing you want to do is just take these. They're all kind of like spread out amongst each other, so you kind of have to pull them in at once, because if you have one that's like in the middle that's sticking to the other side, then the joint is too tight to like just easily collapse it. So you just want to rotate the rotors around like that. Let's see, what do we want to do here? We want to take the entire front section here, and it will split just like that, and then rotate up on this sort of a double hinge section like that, and just leave it like that for now. We'll take these bits here, rotate them around 180 degrees so they face the other direction, just like that. Take these little panels and then rotate them up like that. And then we can take the arms, they just untab from the side here, and we'll just leave this section kind of floating for now. You kind of want to just get it out of the way. Now for this section here with the head, you basically want to kind of unhinge this whole section and then unclip the head from this panel here, so this whole thing can rotate back like this for this mode, and then rotate down, and then these will peg in there. It's kind of a difficult thing to do, actually. Like, the pegs are kind of tight, and it's not like the perfect actual, like spacing for these. So they do like bend slightly when actually plugged in, but there you go. And then we can take the chest panel and just double hinge it up like that. We want to take the whole bottom section here, and it will untab, and then I guess we'll leave that for now. Now this is the really neat section, I think, is you want to take this panel here. These little panels on top will push into the underside just like that. And then you line up the rotors. Actually, first you want to take this bit and rotate that in. Then you line up the blades there, so they'll go through that gap. So you can take this whole section and then double hinge it around like that. And then you rotate up the blades. And then there's a couple things that happen here. It'll compress here on the rotation bit, and then the blades themselves will kind of sandwich into these bits and clip into place, just like that. You kind of have to do them. It's a little easier to do them one at a time than try to force them all in there at once, but they all four will click in just like that. And then you can take these panels here, and they'll just tab into to these sections just like that. And then take this little panel here and rotate that up, and it will click over the rotors there. And that's a really cool mechanism. Like, that's definitely the coolest part of the transformation for sure. And then for the this section here, basically you want to take these panels and rotate them down, and then the wheels here, basically there's a few different joints here, but how you want them is you want to rotate this wheel down like that, and then just tab it into place. And then this one, you forget if it's rotated around. Yeah, it is rotated around. So you rotate it around like that. I actually think that was wrong, and it should have been like this for helicopter mode, because then this tab goes into there. But either way, yeah, you rotate that down and then rotate the wheel around and then tab it in, take these panels and then fold them up like this, and then fold these down the rest of the way. And then, well, I didn't mention it in helicopter mode, but he actually does have a port for a flight stand there, which is nice, which is actually a dedicated joint to get that, because then for the other modes, you actually flip this section up so it sits like that. And then we'll double hinge this down so that these tabs will go into the knees there, just like that. And then you want to straighten out the arms and then rotate them down. And then this tab here will go into this slot on this black panel right there. Just line that all up. There we go. And then you can just take the little, back rotor fin here, and you want to split it down the side and give him like a little spoiler, I guess. It's kind of silly. But yeah, there we have him in his buggy mode. And, excuse me. And yeah, it looks pretty good. It's definitely, it's got a bit of an angle to it. I'd say that this is probably the weakest of the three modes, but I don't really have a huge problem with it. I think that it looks pretty good, and it looks pretty G1 accurate, I would say, as well. It rolls nicely if you get these, arranged properly. There's like some compression joint on the hip here that you want to make sure is in place. Otherwise, this panel will rub up against the ground. But if you have it on place there, he does roll nicely. He does have rubber tires, which I didn't mention in helicopter mode, but still, that's pretty cool. Now, the big thing to complete the look of this mode is if we bring on the cage here, what we can do is actually take off the winch section and then take the cage itself and take off this like lower panel, and then the lower panel itself underneath here. The hole in the middle will actually peg onto here, and then there's two tabs on either side of the inside there. So it helps, it's not really structurally necessary. It's just a place for it to go. But that, does kind of help hold things in place a little bit, but they hold in place just fine on their own. And then what I always do with the winch is I just peg it into to this hole right there, and then you take the actual cage, and then the like third bar on either side will actually slot into these sections here, so you can use the cage itself to give him his little roll cage, which I think is a really neat feature there. And thankfully the buggy mode looks fine enough without that there, so if you don't want to do all the cage stuff, then you can just leave that off to the side. But I do think he looks better with that on there. And then in terms of storage for the guns here, the big one you can just kind of peg on top, so he's got like the armored vehicle mode, which I don't mind the look of. Again, with SANDSTORM, I kind of prefer him to be a pacifist, so I don't have the guns on him, but it does look cool. And then the little gun here, I usually just like peg onto the underside of his arm there, and it's fairly unobtrusive and out of the way. And yeah, great looking vehicle mode there. I definitely prefer the look with the roll cage, but he looks decent either way. But yeah, in terms of comparisons in this mode, here he is again with Kingdom Sideswipe. So you can see that definitely scales a little bit better. Although, I mean, just judging by the apparent size of the cockpit here, or cockpit, canopy, it does seem a little bit small in comparison to Sideswipe, but you can kind of deal with that. But yeah, that's what they look like together. For another buggy comparison, here he is with our most recent Beachcomber, so you can see what the two of them look like together. I always feel like they would probably be buds, since like in the cartoon he's also a pacifist and Beachcomber is a pacifist, and they both turn to buggies. I don't know if we ever actually see them together, but I feel like they'd be friends. And then last but not least, here he is with the Thrilling 30 SANDSTORM, who again has a very different take on the buggy mode, but I always really liked this mode with the stupid humongous wheels. But yep, that's what the two of them look like together. So yeah, honestly, two decent vehicle modes, which is not something that you see all that often with these triple changers. Like I said, I would say that this is probably the weaker of the three modes, but it's still pretty good in my opinion. But yeah, to get on to transformation, obviously we'll just take off all of the accessories. I will say it's a little bit spooky to take off the roll cage, because you do kind of have to like pull them out one at a time, which means you're kind of flexing these pieces, so hopefully that doesn't like snap at some point. This we'll leave on for now because it's a little easier to take off mid transformation, just because of how securely it is tabbed in there. But we just want to take this bit and just fold this back up like it was. Then what do we want to do? We want to take the arms, untab them from the side, and then rotate them up like this, and they'll just lock into place, which is again how they were for helicopter mode. And then while we're at it, we'll just take these sections and then just open this up, flip out the hand and close this back up, and then double hinge the arm down at the elbow there, just like that, and do that on both sides there. Then you want to untab the canopy section there, and we can take the legs, and they're actually on good old-fashioned sliders, which is something you don't really see all that often anymore in Transformers. Usually they find a way to like combine or wars the legs. And then with all this stuff out of the way, you can kind of fold these bits off and then take this panel out from underneath the legs there and put that off to the side. And then we want to basically just fold these up like this, and then take these panels and then fold them back up. And that's pretty much what you do with the wheels there. Then we can take the feet, fold them down, and then the heels will just rotate out like that. And then obviously we'll split the legs, and that's the lower body all done. And now here's really the tricky part here. So you want to take the like this bit here with the head and rotate it around. I do find that this kind of like scrapes up against the inside, so I'm kind of worried about like this orange paint kind of like peeling off at some point. But basically you want to clip the head back into place like that, and then rather than fully compress like it was for helicopter mode, you want to kind of bring it down like one click, and it sits at this like weird sort of angle like this, which is not tricky in and of itself, but this is my main problem with the figure, is that if you try to just bring the chest up and peg it into place, like it doesn't really stay, because there's a few places that it tabs in. It's got the most obvious one is a peg right there, which goes into this hole right there. And you'd sort of think that that's the main thing holding it in place. But I really think the things that hold it in place more are these little tabs right here and these tabs, which go into like this little cavity right in there. And then there's a little like slot area on the like painted window section for the smaller tab, which I honestly I think is just a place for that to go, because the slot here is larger than the tab, so I don't think that's actually holding anything in place. It's just giving it, you know, the real estate. And I find that if you just try to like peg it in like this and you're mainly focused on that front peg, like it does not stay in place like really at all, which kind of sucks. And I wish that this like clipped into place. But if you really pay attention to these tabs and try to make sure that they're in the slots there, what I usually do is I'll rotate the arms out to the side and just give it a good squeeze like on the shoulder joints here and press that in, and then press the chest in. Then it's a lot more secure, but still it's just kind of annoying, and that still can come undone. But there we have SANDSTORM in his robot mode, and yeah, he looks pretty good. I mean, obviously the aesthetic here is very much just, this is the toy design of SANDSTORM with the you know, robot head of the cartoon, but still I quite like it there. But yeah, no, he's a pretty nice looking figure here. There's a couple things about his design I'm not crazy about. I don't really love like how far the wheels jut out, and because he's got these little armatures, if you want, you can actually, they don't tab in, but you can rotate them up like this and just kind of have them sit further up on the leg, which is, you know, less accurate than both the toy and the cartoon, but I just feel like it looks a little bit better. So personally, that's how I prefer to do it. But you know, I'll leave it down here for the sake of the video. But just showing that off is that I don't know, just the look of the wheels just kind of like hanging out on the legs there just looks a little bit messy to me. You know, he's got the thing of like this bit kind of jutting out over his head, which is again, you know, kind of accurate to how he looked in the original toy. But yeah, in terms of articulation, the head is on a ball joint. It's very tight and also like really hard to kind of get your fingers in there because it's between these two pegs, but you can rotate around. This is the new head sculpt there, which looks fairly good. I sort of wish that they gave him maybe like a bit of a smile or something, since the, you know, the character in the show is so friendly. He's got swivels here at the shoulders. That can still happen. Again, you know, the really paying attention and tabbing these in doesn't like totally solve the chest problem. It just makes it a little bit better. But thankfully, like the arm joints are usually, now of course now it's not working, but usually loose enough that they'll give before the thing untabs. But gosh, it, again, is such a pain that it's like so hard to tab that in properly, and even when you do, it's not super secure. Like I find that honestly it's probably just holding on this side, and if I'm really looking in there, it doesn't really look like these are actually tabbed in properly. But you know, you take what you can get, and it can rotate out to the side. He's got a bicep swivel here, which is actually like part of the, you know, like the rectangular sculpting, which is a little strange, but I guess that's just where it happened to fit. You can use this transformation joint as like a little bit of like a backwards butterfly joint, which is, you know, it works well enough. I think the backpack bits stop it before it starts looking really ridiculous. He's got a double jointed elbow with a nice deep curl there. He's got a wrist rotation, again, very tight on mine. He does have a waist joint. It's a little bit strange because I feel like this is like a separate joint where you have to like kind of pull this forward and like extend this out. I cannot tell. Well, actually, I don't know. I was thinking that that was actually a joint earlier, but I think maybe I was just accidentally disconnecting the mushroom peg there. But you can get a little bit of rotation out of it, but not a ton before it starts bumping into the backpack. But yeah, keeping like the proper center of gravity and this tabbed into place properly, like, you know, the mushroom peg actually locked in, then he only gets that much rotation. Hips can go forward and back about that far. Out to the side, he's got a thigh swivel. He's got about maybe a degree less than 90 degrees of bend of the knee, which honestly, with his like back hollow legs here, you'd sort of wish it could go a little bit further, but whatever. The feet can tilt out to the side like that, and then they can't really tilt forward, but they can tilt back for transformation. And you know, I do find that like sometimes if you have a bunch of the junk on his back, then you know he does tend to lean back a little bit, but it's not too bad. But yeah, in terms of all of his stuff here, obviously we can give him his gun, give him the little pistol there, or if you want, you could have it mounted to his wrist. This, like, the sculpting on this gun is so specific that I feel like surely this must be a reference to something that the character had, but I couldn't tell you. And then obviously you can take the cage back here and just attach it like it was before with the little winch. And it's not like a whole lot you can do with it in this mode. Like you can peg it into his hand and then have the string extended so he like holds it with his other hand, and that looks, you know, kind of neat, but it's a little bit strange in this mode, but you know, that's decent. And then in terms of storage, he does have two holes on the back here that you could use to peg things into. I usually, you know, take the cage and peg it into one of these, and then obviously just extend it up. And it does kind of still just like hang off of his back. It's a shame that there's not like somewhere where it can more, you know, like concretely clip into place, but whatever. And then you could take the other gun and peg it on here, and then this gun, I guess you could just peg it to the underside of the cage. So he can store all of his stuff. It's not like incredible storage, and obviously the cage kind of rattles around back there, but you know, there's an effort there, I suppose. But yeah, no, I quite like the way his robot mode looks. Really, I'd say that the one big thing about this figure that does kind of suck is just that chest not tabbing into place properly. And once you get it, it is fairly secure, but it does not take like a lot to unclip it from place there, and it's kind of a pain to get it back. But you know, it's not the end of the world. It's not the worst I've seen, but I do wish that that was a little bit better. And I wish that they had fixed that, because that was a problem on the, you know, Legacy United version. And it's a shame that they didn't like add more secure tabbing, a more secure tabbing mechanism for this guy specifically. Also, I had kind of wondered this, if you could actually have him hold this bit, and you kind of can't, because he's got like, there's this little notch on there that keeps this bit from rotating around when it's pegged in there, so it can't actually fit into like a regular 5mm port. You can, I think, get it into like one of these. I was gonna say, no, not even really the hexagonal ones. It's still a little bit too big. You could peg other things onto this port though, if you have that not there, but then there's nothing to do with this bit. I'm not sure why that's packed separately, but whatever. But yeah, in terms of comparisons in this mode, here he is again with Kingdom Sideswipe, so you can see what they look like together. Again, you know, obviously he's a leader class. I mean, one of those like Voyager sized leaders that is just more complicated because he's got to do the triple changer thing. Here he is just for posterity's sake again with Vortex and Beachcomber, so you can see what he looks like with the two of them. Here he is again with Thrilling 30 Sandstorm, so you can see, yeah, I mean, obviously he's a cool looking robot, but just design-wise, he takes so many liberties with the Sandstorm design that he's almost unrecognizable. So I definitely much prefer this look for Sandstorm, even if he's leaning a little bit more towards the toy direction, and I would have preferred a little bit more towards the cartoon direction. He's still a lot more recognizable than this guy is. Not that he's not a cool figure, he's just, quite different from the G1 Sandstorm design. And then last but not least, here he is again with Slugslinger. And yeah, it's a decent pack, especially if you're one of those people that had a hard time finding Slugslinger like at the time or just missed it, then it's a great way to get a figure that like goes for a lot on the aftermarket. Unfortunately for me, I do have a Slugslinger, so like I didn't really need this guy, but I really wanted the like clean face design for Sandstorm. So maybe I'll sell my old Slugslinger now or this one. I'm not even sure which one I like better, to be honest. But yeah, it's a decent set, especially if this was a guy you were wanting to pick up. But then if you'd both not picked up this guy and waited for Sandstorm to have like the cartoon face, then this is a great set. But if you have either one of those already, then you are more or less buying a figure you already have, which is kind of a bummer. And that's exactly why they sold this set this way. If I had been given the choice, I would have just bought Sandstorm on his own, but this is how they decided to release him, unfortunately. But, that's old news for multi-pack discussions there. But yeah, no, he's a fun figure. The chest is like, I don't know. I hope it just doesn't get worse, honestly, because I can deal with it how it is, but if it really got like, if the tolerances were just a little bit different and it really didn't tab into place like at all, like that would kind of ruin the figure. So hopefully it stays at least okay. But other than that, he's a really wonderful figure that, has a great looking robot mode, great looking both vehicle modes, which is not something you can often say for triple changers. So yeah, that's pretty much all there is to it. If you enjoy my videos, make sure to leave a like and consider subscribing to the channel. I do reviews every Tuesday and Thursday. And without further ado, here we have Transformers Wreck and Doom Collection Autobot Sandstorm.